So far, Abdul Carter's move to defensive end has been bad to say the least, but Penn State still needs to keep him there.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, there is a case to be made to move Carter back to linebacker, but I firmly believe he should absolutely stay at defensive end. I'll share with you my initial thoughts on Penn State versus Kent State, and soon enough, there will be head coaching rumors again centered around James Franklin. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, but more importantly, be a part of the conversation. Do you think Abdul Carter should go back to linebacker or stay at defensive end? And that's where we will start this conversation. Abdul Carter should absolutely stay at defensive end, even though the experiment has not gone well. Carter has been bad at defensive end, to say the least. Now, he's made plays at times. He's shown up at times. I think of the one play at West Virginia where he caused an early fumble, right? And that shifted momentum back to Penn State. But he has not shown up consistently. That's the key part of it. So he's made select plays here and there, but he has not shown up consistently the way that he has wrecked game plans of opposing offenses over the past 2 seasons. Now, why is that? Carter's move to defensive end, first and foremost, is overall, it's a learning experience. And this is something that we addressed up front. They couldn't have made the decision sooner. I mean, that would have helped to get things started, but I feel like they probably went through so many steps to even decide ultimately what was going to happen. But this is a learning process. There is an uphill battle to this because he's played linebacker for so long and then moving to defensive end. And it's only been 2 games. He's only going to get better. But it is important to acknowledge that still in the beginning of the season, you need any player. Think of him as a rookie to an extent, okay? As talented as he is, he's a rookie defensive end. So give him time to develop at his new position. Carter is still drawing double teams and plenty of attention from opposing offenses. That's a second reason here. Offenses are keying in on Carter. They're trying to figure out where he is. They're game planning for him. And now that he's closer to the quarterback, you've seen how a Bowling Green, for example, and to an extent a West Virginia as well, they made it apparent that their game plan was to get the football out of the quarterback's hands as quickly as possible now that Carter is closer to the point of attack from defense. So they have to account for him still. So combine that inexperience with the initiative from opposing offenses through the 2 games here, West Virginia and Bowling Green, you're going to get poor results. Offenses, they're just getting rid of the football quickly so that he cannot make plays. And it's backed up now. People might argue and say, no, actually he's been good or he's been okay. He's still Abdul Carter. Then his Pro Football Focus grade wouldn't be the worst on the team. I know. I was surprised to see that Zane Durant is at the top right now after 2 games, being the best overall defensive player for Penn State. And Abdul Carter is the worst. It's a 55. That's not only the worst on the team, that's just flat out, that's a bad grade. That is a bad grade for Abdul Carter. But I'm confident it's going to get better because there is an interesting statistic here. This isn't included in PFF's overall overview. You really have to dig for this one, but this is an interesting one. Get off distance. And that caught my eye because Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton are both in the top 5 of this stat category, in top 5 of this metric. Carter's number 1 with 5.01 yards, and then Dennis Sutton is number 4 on the list at 4.36. Meaning they are getting the furthest, the closest to a quarterback before the play is made. So they are getting upfield, they're getting so close to making the play, but they're not doing it. So it's impressive. It's also meaningless to an extent, because it's a fancy way of saying you didn't make the play. You don't make the play here, but it is an indicator that DDS and Carter are very close to disrupting the play, but Bowling Green especially. West Virginia not as much, but Bowling Green especially had that initiative to get the football out of the hands of the quarterback And that's why these analytics are important, because they tell the other side of the story. So Abdul Carter is clearly having no issues getting off the line of scrimmage, getting upfield and getting after the quarterback. He's just not able to make the play in time because realistic, and you have to be reasonable with that too. Unless he can teleport in 1.5 seconds, he was not going to get a sack against Connor Bazelak and Bowling Green. And here's another argument to this, is the fact that Carter should move back to the linebacker group because they need him. Okay, I've seen this. You moved one of your best overall players, who was a linebacker, away from a group that needs the most help. And it's kind of the no good deed shall go unpunished sort of sense. I get why they did it. I completely understand, because Carter is just a pure playmaker. Move your best playmaker closer to the line of scrimmage so that he can get after the quarterback. I mean, he essentially was a stand-up defensive end for the most part. He was pretty solid. I'll give him credit where credit is due. Pretty solid in pass coverage, dropping back as a linebacker. But we know what Abdul Carter's specialty was: rushing the quarterback as this stand-up, free-form pass rusher that lined up anywhere in the formation. You can still do that as a defensive end. Your hand is just on the turf instead of being a stand-up from the linebacker position, showing blitz or being backed off, right? But you take away from a group an overall stud, one of the best prospects in next year's NFL draft. You take him away from a group that still has two studs. Tony Rojas is way ahead of schedule in terms of his development. Kobe King, I would argue, is playing football on Sundays and will go into next year's draft. You have two reliable veterans in Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, and then one key depth piece who is hurt in Tamir Robinson. So you have 5 linebackers that you can trust at this point, and you see how I've ranked them here. It's not really enough in the arsenal right now at linebacker, and I know all too well that Penn State is linebacker U. So now why should Abdul Carter stay at defensive end? They need him at defensive end just as much as they need him at linebacker. Smith Vilbert and Amin Vanover are solid, but they're second string. They are too deep on the depth chart. Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter are your star playmakers that you need as your starters. There's no doubt in my mind that Smith Vilbert or Amin Vanover would be able to do well in a role situation where they are a starter for a game or two, but not consistently. That's why you move Carter down to defensive end. And after that, the defensive end depth is just as questionable as the linebacker depth. So I've criticized linebackers a lot, saying, hey, the depth chart is questionable. You really have 5 that you can trust, and then you have the one injury to Tamir Robinson. The freshmen still have a lot to prove, which we'll talk about. But Zariah Fisher being injured does not help in this case. And as much as I don't like to bring it up, Jameel Lyons being kicked off the team, this totally changed how well the defensive depth chart was supposed to look at the beginning of the season. But of course, things change, things out of Penn State's control, and Abdul Carter needs to be at defensive end just as much as they could use his help at linebacker. Mason Robinson, Joseph Mapoye, they have upside, but Penn State clearly does not trust them. They're not playing. They would be third on the depth chart in this case. But if Penn State truly believed in their ability, they would be playing a little more and cycled in as backups here and there. But they're not. Abdul Carter is only going to get better. He's only going to get better at defensive end. His best days at defensive end are ahead of him. Again, think of him as a rookie. Rookies get better down the stretch of the season, so he's going to have a slow start. This was kind of anticipated here. He's only going to get better. He's already, on the bright side, he's already forcing offenses to alter their game plan significantly to an extent. So if he's doing that now with limited impact, just imagine what the results will be by midseason and beyond, when it really does matter for Penn State going down in the stretch when they are a college football playoff type of team. Penn State is still in the top 10, but they did move in the latest AP rankings, and they play Kent State. So this is a good game for them to kind of correct some things before they really get into the heavy part of the schedule. We'll talk about why the AP poll dropped them, even though Penn State didn't play a game, on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. You want to get in shape, but are you having trouble staying motivated? Make 5-hour energy shots a part of your lifestyle to get that energy boost that you need to get fit. We all know that sometimes you don't want to go to the gym, and that's okay. So take a 5-hour energy shot to give you the feeling and alertness so you can get to the gym. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore, like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and so much more that there is a flavor for everyone. You can try them all. You go to the website and you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get a 5-Hour Energy product today, use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders either. But again, that is LOCKEDONCFB for 20% off your order. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. Let's try to make some sense of this. Penn State drops 2 spots to 10th in the latest AP poll, even though they did not play a game. They were on the bye week, and I don't disagree with it. I get that they didn't play, so there really wasn't a chance for them to bolster their resume, but it isn't exactly the team's fault that they just didn't play a game in week 3. So the AP voters are going off of the fact that Penn State had the scare against a MAC team. I mean, that was close. That was only a 7-point deficit, and Bowling Green was still in it, even though Penn State had control through most of the second half. You can still, I still think an argument can be made that Penn State should still be number 8 over the likes of maybe a Missouri or Miami of Florida. They have identical resumes to this point, aside from playing one additional game. You have a quality win against a Power 4 out-of-conference opponent. Miami, Florida, for example, they beat Florida to open up the season, and we'll talk about Florida actually in the upcoming segment here. But that I know they aren't that caliber of an opponent, but it's comparable for the AP voters to look at that as West Virginia, or in the case of Missouri, who just beat a Boston College and then winning the Group 5 matchups, and the real competition that you should be winning against. The difference is Miami and Missouri have beaten that competition a little more convincingly, whereas Penn State did not. Now, in steps Kent State here. So Penn State being number 10 in the AP poll does not surprise me. They just didn't have the opportunity to bolster their case at that point. And really the ranking, the only ranking that matters is the college football playoff ranking when it is released around the midpoint of the season. In steps Kent State here. Penn State is a massive favorite, massive 48.5-point favorite. Total is set at 54.5. Kickoff is set for 3:30. That took an awfully long time to figure out when Penn State was going to play Kent State, and it's going to be on the Big Ten Network. Obviously, this is a game that Penn State should win, and they will win. This isn't another instance of Bowling Green. I can say that with confidence. Kent State is a bottom 5 team in the country, and the results back it up. They just lost to Tennessee 71-0. 71-0. They also lost to an FCS team, St. Francis, 23-17, and then they lost to Pitt 55-24. Another team that lost to Pitt, West Virginia. Wow, if anybody was paying attention to that game. That was a very good game. So Kent State is by no means, they are not good. Bowling Green, well coached, well disciplined, veteran team. Kent State's truly going through an overhaul. A rebuild doesn't even begin to describe what the Golden Flashes are doing right now, where they are in a program turnaround, and it's not going well whatsoever in year 2 of this rebuild under the new coach. So will Penn State cover that 48.5 point spread? They can. They should. They have the bye week to rest and get specific players healthy. I would be surprised as far as how much those players actually play. A KJ Winston or a Tamir Robinson, unfortunately, we don't know the severity of some of these bumps and bruises, because James Franklin, unless specified he says that the player he likes to talk to the players and the families of those players to say how do we want to approach the injury report, if you will. And so unless he has the green light to share that information, he's not going to. So those specific players that we know are dealing with the bumps and bruises, we don't know the severity of it. I don't know that we'll see a KJ Winston or a Tamir Robinson or even a Khalil Dinkins. We know that Andrew Rapplier is out for an extended period of time. That is what's been classified by Coach Franklin as a long-term injury. So those players will be missing, but Penn State doesn't exactly need them against Kent State. The offense is humming along thus far. The defense is the one that actually needs to make a statement. You made the statement against West Virginia, but then you had the scare. If it wasn't for the offense bailing you out, Bowling Green could have been a much different situation here. I do expect a lot of the backups to play early, play often, especially the freshmen with upside. So think Tyser Denmark. Luke Reynolds is obvious because the depth chart permits it so, right? Andrew Rapley is out. Dinkins is dealing with bumps and bruises and needs to get back to game speed. But Luke Reynolds, this is a prime opportunity to start him alongside Tyler Warren and have him play a full game. Maybe even see a Quentin Martin offensively. This could be a game where maybe you see him a little bit at wide receiver. Maybe he helps out as the number 3 running back. I know Cam Wallace is there, but you have to get Martin some playing time while you can still preserve his red shirt for 4 games. On defense, I'll even throw Ethan Grunkmeyer in this conversation. Grunkmeyer was questionable going into Bowling Green, but if you can get him into this game, you absolutely get Grunkmeyer to play in this game. On defense, Dejon Lane, everybody talks about Dejon Lane, and for good reason. He is that next safety up behind KJ Winston, Zach Wheatley, and Jalen Reed. At linebacker, Anthony Specca, Kari Jackson, those players immediately come to mind because of the limited depth at the linebacker spot. So especially those defensive guys, because they need to build out the depth chart before that 4-game stretch. Before you get to Illinois and UCLA are going to pose their own challenges, but I think Penn State still wins convincingly in those games. When it comes to USC, Wisconsin, I know they got an injured quarterback. We'll readdress that there, but that's still a top 10 defense. Wisconsin does have a top 10 defense. Ohio State is obviously the team that it is, and I know Washington lost to Washington State, but that is a team that I think can actually turn the corner in the second half. So don't overlook that one. Don't overlook the Huskies to that point. There's still plenty of talent. My point is that the depth chart needs to be bolstered, needs to be as strong as it is. And this game against Kent State is so valuable. It's unfortunate to an extent that Bowling Green couldn't have been that, or that there isn't another game like this for Penn State to have an opportunity to play the young players a little more. If I am Penn State, I try to get those players in the game as soon as possible. Build out a 50-point lead, just like Tennessee did, and do not look back. That way that you can accomplish the more important goals that you have. Winning the game, I understand. James Franklin's going to say 1-0. He was asked specifically about a question, getting the backups into the game as soon as possible. And he says, hey, we're concerned with winning above all else, but they know that the goal is to get those young players as much experience as possible so that they are ready for not only Ohio State and USC and the other tougher games, but Illinois and UCLA. Those are Big Ten conference games, and they are just as important because they count towards the conference championship, which also, again, that really, if Penn State can find its way into the conference championship, that will really help its case getting into the college football playoff and not leaving it up to the judgment of the committee if they are on the bottom half of that top 11. Because remember, it's not the top 12. They have to be in the top 11 with that one spot going to a G5 school. I want to pivot, and we're going to go to a conversation. I don't like stoking the rumors. I don't like stoking the flames when it comes to the rumors here, but I want my listeners, I want my viewers to be prepared with what's going to be on the horizon with James Franklin and the coaching carousel, because the rumors are going to start up once again. We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5. $5 is all it takes, and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. And all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time, so there's no obligation. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you look over at FanDuel, Penn State and Kent State, the game lines are posted. There's no money line on this one, and Penn State is a 48.5-point favorite. The total is set at 54.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Be prepared for the next wave of rumors here for James Franklin to be the next head coach at Florida. Oh, they're going to swirl, and these rumors will be more legitimate compared to James Franklin to USC, James Franklin to Alabama, right? Where it seems like it's a name being thrown out there for a job. No, there is going to be genuine interest from Florida in James Franklin. Now, I will say this, he will not be the first candidate on Florida's list, but easily within the top 5. And I'd argue probably within the top 3. It sounds like Lane Kiffin is the #1 guy. It's the ideal candidate to replace Billy Napier down at Florida. But there is a case to be made for James Franklin and the Florida Gators. I'm being honest from my perspective. This was the job that I've always been concerned about when it opened up a few years back and Florida made the interesting decision to hire Billy Napier. I was never that big of a fan of it to begin with, and we now see the results that have come along with it. But Franklin has had so much success recruiting, and I know that's not just him, that's the staff, that's everybody that's involved, but James Franklin has had success and ample success recruiting from Pennsylvania. He's not recruiting somewhere that's in proximity to Florida, but somehow he's able to get quite a number of Florida recruits to go all the way up to Pennsylvania. I think culturally he would fit in well with what Florida would try to do with its rebuild. And he has head coaching experience in the SEC when he was at Vanderbilt, of course. So this is something that's probably really valuable to the Gators at this point, especially after this disaster with Billy Napier. Franklin also has Florida people on the staff, J1 Sider and Phil Troutwine, and he's had other assistant coaches that have gone to coach down at Florida. Take a Sean Spencer, for example, right? The different dynamic there, but currently on staff, right? Sider and Troutwine. I mean, that is appealing. I don't want to try to stir anything 3 weeks into the season, but keep an eye on this. I think it's important for you as a viewer and a listener of Locked On Nittany Lions to understand that this is on the horizon, that the James Franklin coaching rumors are going to happen once again. And I've talked to my counterpart from Locked On Gators, who covers the Florida Gators very well, and Brandon over there, and he says that the fan base is behind the idea of James Franklin as the next head coach of Florida. It's not that Lane Kiffin's the #1 guy. When it comes to the fan base, most of them are going to say we want Lane Kiffin. But James Franklin's name has been thrown around in discourse, and they say, you know what, that's not bad if we don't get our top candidate. So Billy Napier is the coach of head Florida. He's not going to be the head coach for much longer there. It's only a matter of time. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And the results that they've had have been bad, and the schedule ahead of them gets even tougher. From 1,000 feet, it feels like Napier has lost the locker room. He's lost the boosters, everybody who's responsible and contributes to NIL. The board itself, they had this emergency meeting, but everything's still status quo at this point. The team just looks defeated. Watching these games, they just don't. Miami of Florida open up the season, and then this most recent one against Texas A&M, putting in the freshman phenom quarterback isn't going to solve anything, and it feels like that he can't even figure that part out, who he's going to play, a Graham Mertz or DJ Lagway. Look, I'm not the expert on the Gators here. I'm just trying to add perspective here that Florida is going to make a move. They're going to make a move soon, and that's going to start. That is going to start swirling the rumors, but Florida's also going to have a head start on the coaching cycle before everybody else, because they're going to have a vacancy and they're going to start doing interviews and do their due diligence ahead of everybody else that needs a candidate. And that's good for Florida's program as itself. For Penn State, looking at it, hey, Penn State's head coach is James Franklin. They don't need that in the most important, and I am not here to say whether or not James Franklin entertains the idea, potentially utilizes it to get another extension, right? I'm not trying to speak on behalf of what James Franklin would do, but just be prepared that James Franklin is going to be linked to this job, be linked and thought of as an ideal candidate to replace Billy Napier. And we'll see what ultimately happens. I'm just here to say that he is a realistic candidate for Florida. He is an ideal candidate for the program, and the discourse in the media is going to say just as much. It's going to echo the same thing as the Gators get ready to start their next head coaching search. It would take a miracle for Billy Napier to save his job. That's all I know at this point. And that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Please leave a like on it, but more importantly, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, whether it's about Abdul Carter, where Penn State ranks in the AP poll, Penn State versus Kent State, or the rumors that are probably not too far in the future linking James Franklin to the Florida Gators when they ultimately move on from Billy Napier. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin. Week in, week out, get you prepared for all of the recaps, the news leading up to the games, and then previewing that next upcoming slate of college football games. Everything that is college football related, Spencer McLaughlin is talking about it. And that's why it's called Locked On College Football. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.